Just to the right of the stage. Although not a part of Matt's presentation tonight, Matt is also a talented web developer, has his own design development business, and is a partner with Ways We Work, which has chronicled the lives of all types of creatives and how they manage their day-to-day. Make sure to chat with him later tonight about all of his endeavors. Please welcome Matt Quinn.
Woo! Yes, Matt.
Hey, how's everyone doing? Good. This is crazy. Look at this. This is like so many people here. This is fantastic. So yes, thank you very much, Justin, for introducing me, and thanks for putting this event on. This is just absolutely awesome to see so many people here in KW. The creative community here is obviously flourishing. You know, sometimes we all kind of hide out in our basements, but to have events like this where, you know, it brings us all together, it's really, really awesome. So yes, my name is Matt Quinn, and during the day, I am a user experience designer and front-end web developer. But when I'm not in front of my computer, I'm either playing with my kids or I'm out doing this. And this is where I really love to kind of wander around in the middle of nowhere, capturing photos of the stars. You know, outside of my design and code life, I'm an obsessed landscape photographer. I'm really drawn to just the adventure and the beauty found in nature. It's a way for me to kind of disconnect from the technology that I'm surrounded with every day and reconnect with the natural world around me. Capturing these like captivating photos of these amazing locations under the stars and is an amazing adventure, and it allows me to kind of bring this adventure home with me. The photos are like a bit of like a capsule that I can kind of share with the people that I care about. And I love capturing photos of the night sky just because the night sky has this mystery associated with it. There's this you know, most of the time people tend to be afraid of the dark, or it's kind of this like, you know, hidden place that we all kind of sleep through. But using a camera and using long exposure photography, it can reveal this hidden world. And that just fascinates me, that I can see more with a camera than I can see with my own eye. So I thought I would share a bit about how I got into this kind of hobby, or whatever you want to call it, creative form of art. It all started about 8.5 years ago. And this was kind of like how it all got going. You know, before this, I really captured photos of, you know, they were really unintentional. It was just kind of little mementos of my life and, you know, of, you know, my food and whatever, you know, like there wasn't anything special. But when my daughter came into the world, I really wanted to start capturing that experience we were having, this upheaval in our lives, and, you know, document it in a beautiful way, not just in kind of just like a necessary way or just like an unintentional way of doing it. So I bought a camera, and she was my model for the first few years. I took like probably 50,000 photos of her. But this is really where it all began. And I learned kind of like the aspects of how a camera works, how a DSLR camera works, and all the mechanics of, you know, shutter speed and aperture and ISO and all that fun stuff. And I got a few cute shots of her, right? So, and as most parents, you know, especially new parents do, you know, I started thinking more about my own lifestyle and how I wanted to kind of bring my children up in the world. And I started seeing how technology was kind of like consuming my life in so many ways. And I noticed how much time I was spending staring into a screen. You know, most of my day at work, I was staring into a screen. I'd come home and I would watch Netflix and I'd stare into a screen, and then I'd, you know, go to bed and I'd look at my iPhone and, you know, maybe too much information, but I'd go to the bathroom and be looking at my iPhone, you know. And, you know, I just, you know, thinking about that and thinking about my daughter, I kind of realized, well, you know, my life is being spent staring into a screen. So the solution really wasn't about abandoning technology and running away and buying a cabin and moving to the woods and just saying forget it all. It was just about finding a better balance between the virtual world, like that was staring, you know, into my screen, and the natural world that kind of surrounded me outside of that screen. You know, and I always loved being outdoors, but living in downtown Toronto at the time, you know, the natural world became really kind of more distant and unfamiliar. It was just kind of like this place I saw on Instagram or, you know, on Facebook and on these beautiful photos online, and I was losing this connection with it, and I didn't like that, and I didn't want to lose that connection, and I wanted to kind of have those experiences like I did when I was a kid, because I grew up in the middle of like kind of nowhere, Ontario, and I was always out camping and exploring, so I didn't want to lose touch with that experience, and I wanted my kids to have this kind of outdoors experience as well, instead of just knowing daddy's the guy who stares at the screen. So I started small. We made some big life changes first, but as far as photography goes, I started small. You know, we moved from Toronto to Cambridge to be closer to family, and there was this byproduct of also being closer to a lot of more natural areas that we have in the Waterloo region. So photography, I just grabbed my camera one day and I went outside to my backyard, and I was like, well, what am I going to take a picture of? There's not a lot of stars, but the moon was bright in the sky, so I decided to just focus in on that. And when I took this picture, I was actually really surprised about how much detail I could get in the moon. When you look at the moon in the night sky, it's typically, just a bright white ball, or it's like a little crescent or something, but you can't see a lot of detail. Maybe like with your eye you can see a little bit, but with a camera you can adjust the shutter speed and you can see more. You can see more of the detail. You can see the craters. You can see the flat areas of the moon. And this kind of really opened my eyes to the idea that with a camera you can see more. It allows you to it opens your mind to a different kind of perspective. So from this point, I was just kind of like wowed by the whole experience, and I had to learn more. So I just did some serious Googling on night sky photography and went to kind of YouTube University on how to take a night sky photo, and set my sights on capturing some more stuff. So this was the first image, and I'm not sure if you can see it super well, but from back there, but this was the first image I caught of the Milky Way and of the stars. And again, much like the moon photo, I was totally blown away with the perspective that it gave me. It showed me that, what I was looking at, I could see more of the night sky. I could see these clouds of light. Again, you can kind of see them with the naked eye, but you don't pay attention to them, I think, as much as you do when you get to see them in a photograph. And then you kind of look at the camera LCD, and you look up at the sky, and you look at your camera LCD, and you're like, that's there. It's kind of crazy. So this kind of experience is where I got really hooked on all of this, and it kind of changed my perspective at all, because with my camera I could now kind of capture what we were a part of, beyond just the troubles in my computer screen or my mortgage payments and all this other stuff. I was like, we were on this little blue ball flying through space, and with my camera I could capture these views of it all kind of unfolding, and all of these things move through the night sky, which I never really paid attention to before this. So needless to say, I was really hooked on the process, and I was like, what else could I find? So this was the next thing I took a photograph of, and this is the Andromeda Galaxy. So this is a whole other galaxy. So we're inside of one of these right now, the Milky Way galaxy, which is hard to believe. But this is our neighboring galaxy, called the Andromeda Galaxy. It's about 2.5 million light years away, which is far. But with our camera, with the camera, like a simple DSLR camera, we can capture these images. There's a lot of technical post-processing that goes into kind of putting these together, but you can still take a photograph of these things and see it on your camera. And every single time I do, I'm always like kind of just blown away, because you look up in the sky and you can't see it. It's just, with binoculars you can see a little haze. And this is absolutely huge in our night sky too. So the Andromeda Galaxy is actually, if you took 4 full moons and put them beside each other, that's how big this is in our night sky. But we just can't see it. So again, it's an amazing time we have this technology that kind of augments our eyes to see these really amazing things that are hidden in nature. So at this point, I was just totally obsessed with night sky photography. I wanted to learn as much as I possibly could. But between work and fatherhood and everything else that I was, that you manage in adult life, you have to kind of be creative in how you, get away and do these things. Fortunately for me, a lot of what I was doing was happening at night, so, my kids were in bed and work wasn't happening. So I just sacrificed sleep. That was the biggest thing to learn. But my strategy was pretty straightforward. It was just like, I just want to keep doing this, and I want to get better at it. So I just want to create as much work as I possibly can. And that's what I did. So I would get up at 2 or 3 in the morning and drive hours to escape city lights to capture these compositions of the Milky Way and the night sky in these really dark places. And my wife probably thought I'd gone a little bit nuts at the time, maybe like a midlife crisis or something, but no, which is not true. She's actually super supportive. But maybe I thought she might think I'm going nuts. But, and no sunset or sunrise was safe. I had to get out, and I was always monitoring the clouds, and I was always like, is it going to be beautiful tonight? Oh, maybe I'll sneak out and get a photo, just to learn how to put these compositions together. And this is just down the road from my house in Cambridge, along the Grand River. This is in the spring when everything's nice and fresh and green. And I was obsessed with reflections last year too. So every day though, there's always an opportunity to get out there and capture some sort of interesting, beautiful moment in nature. And that's what I was chasing. And then over time, these adventures really became an essential part of my life, and the adventure way and a lot more stars. In this next photo, so this is another image down near Lake Erie, which is a really dark location, but it's kind of surrounded by a lot of urban areas. And you can see this golden glow down here on the horizon, and that's coming across the lake from the U.S., from like Cleveland and Erie, and you can see how there's this transition from this human-made, light into this natural light. And that's what I love about this shot, is just that it shows this kind of transition from kind of like our influence, and then there's nature's just above us kind of doing its thing. But then you can get into a dark location, and you can see how all of that light pollution just vanishes, which is really, from a photographic standpoint, is what is the ideal. But even from a visual standpoint with your eye, you're going to see an absolute ton of stars if you go up to like Algonquin or Bruce Peninsula, just simply because it's not that light pollution getting in the way. And this is really what you have to look for. And there's some great tools to kind of let us find these dark locations. This is a dark sky map, and this will plot. This will allow me to plan where I want to go shoot. You can see here in Toronto and the Golden Horseshoe, it's just a whiteout of light pollution. But as you move north, this is KW here. So as you move north, you start to get into the yellows and the greens, and that's where, the light pollution kind of starts moving towards the horizon. I personally love to shoot in the blues and the blacks, obviously, because the blacks are where the starlight really shines. But if you just want to go hang out, you can go up to Conestoga Lake or something. This conservation area here is where I took that earlier photo. That's a great place just to lie to the stars and check it out. And that's only like half an hour, 45 minutes away. So these light maps are great. If you can Google, light pollution map if you want to have, see something like this, or you can email me as well. I can send you the ones that I use. So the next thing you have to think about with the night sky is the moon. So this is not obviously a human-made problem. This is the moon doing its thing, and it's a source of light as well. So it's going to drown out the starlight, just like our city lights would. So when the moon's up in the night sky, you're not going to see as many stars. So here's an example of a night sky with the moon up. It's still beautiful. You can see the Milky Way, you can see some stars, but again, you're not going to see the same detail you would if you had this. So this is about an hour later, after the moon goes down, and you can see there's just so much more detail and so much more starlight in the sky, which is super, super awesome. So how you can kind of plan your trip around this is looking at, it's a moon phase calendar, and this will basically show you the month you're in and allow you to kind of figure out when you can get into one of these locations without the moon being a big issue. And what I typically do is, there's a full moon every month, sometimes 2 a month, but there's a full moon and a new moon. And the new moon is when the moon is just not up at all at night. So what I usually do is I take about 5 or 7 days on either side of the new moon, and that becomes my window every month, where I can know there's going to be a great opportunity to get out and shoot the night sky without the moon playing a factor in the whole thing. So this is kind of like some of the planning that you have to do to kind of like make sure that the moon isn't going to get into your shot. The last factor is the weather, and this one's like the wild card in the whole thing. The weather will do its thing. It's just random, right? We do our best to predict it, but it's always changing. So what I typically do for this is that I'll start thinking about when I'll look at the moon phase, and I'll start thinking about when I want to go out. But then I'll start looking at the forecast, and for example here, okay, well, Friday's looking clear, -22, that's pleasant. So I'll be like, maybe, am I working that day? Maybe I'm not working that day. I'll have to figure out all those details, but I'll kind of watch the calendar, and I'll cross-reference with various different weather sources, because different models will say different things. Like Environment Canada might say, super clear, but you can see here, not super clear. And, there's other forecasts too. So what I'd like to do to kind of, mitigate any kind of, not seeing the stars or driving 3 hours and getting clouded out, which is a total bummer, I'll cross-reference to make sure it's actually worthwhile to go. And then as soon as it gets closer to, when I'd actually like to go out, these are cloud cover forecasts, and there's a few different ones you can look at. But I'll cross-reference different ones just to kind of get an idea. And this will give me basically like a 48 to 36 hour window of what the cloud cover will be like in the next day or so. And if things are looking like I might have a window, like the clouds will open up or like the clouds will push out at like a certain time, then I'll head out. But if it's looking the opposite, then I'm staying home. So this is the best way to kind of like reduce some of the risk. But sometimes I've gone out and it's just been a wash. So everyone loves a good Venn diagram. So this is kind of how it works, right? So there's these three kind of factors that come into play. So there's dark skies, obviously, is the first one, moonlight, and clear skies. And so every month, this like happy area here, it only happens a couple days. There's the windows of getting out and shooting these things are actually quite small, and that's what actually makes it so much fun. It's a bit of a chase. It's an adventure just to try to like put yourself in the right place at the right time within this window, and then hopefully capture something really nice. So what this does is, what's this kind of like constant Venn diagram and is always running in my head, and what it does is it's kind of put me in tune with the ebbs and flows of nature like I have never been before. Like I've paid attention. I've never paid attention to the moon and the clouds and the stars like I do now. And I'm always looking at my window going, what's it going to do? What's it going to do? And it forces me to kind of live in the moment more. I'm not always like planning ahead and, anxious about the future and, all this stuff. It just plants me in the moment, which is definitely a welcome kind of, thing in my life, because I'm always kind of like, the future. So that's been a nice change. So what does it mean? Sometimes these adventures don't pan out, and you come home with nothing, and that can be a bummer. But however, sometimes you can go out there, and you can have one of these really, really great experiences out in nature where everything does align for you, and you have these really kind of double rainbow moments where you're like, this is crazy. Like things like you might see a meteor shower, you might see some, the northern lights, or there's something that happens that really kind of makes that chase worthwhile. And you might have your own double rainbow moment out there where you're I've never cried, I don't think anyway. But if you don't know what the double rainbow guy is, I definitely, it's worth a Google or go on YouTube and check it out. This is double rainbow, and the guy's just like beside himself about how amazing it is. So just pretend that's
because he knows.
He knows, right?
He knows.
Yeah, it's so intense. So on top of like all, obviously having these really great experiences, the challenge is really when you actually catch one of those windows, when you've had that alignment of the weather and the dark skies and all these other things, is then the creative challenge. This is where you have your camera gear with you. It's like, now what do I do? How do I capture this moment and so I can bring something home with me that I can share with the people I care about, that's going to be compelling for them too. That's going to tell a story about nature or my experience in nature or something they can relate to. And that's really, so there's all this technical stuff that I talked about. But this creative challenge is really what I love the most and why I do it. Because photography, it allows me to kind of pay that experience forward to people and hopefully inspire them to kind of get out there and maybe seek out a couple double rainbow moments of themselves, or just pay it forward like, the photographers who inspired me 4+ years ago when I got started in this whole thing. Just to go out there, it doesn't have to be elaborate. You don't need to go nuts like I do. But maybe just grab a blanket sometime when you're out camping and look at the stars, or go for a hike, or just do something, just start small, right? And that's what hopefully I can do with my photography. So I thought I'd share some of my double rainbow moments with you guys. First and foremost, it's just about being out in the dark. Usually you're in the middle of nowhere, and there's no cell phone signal. You're often alone, although sometimes I'm not. Like I'm out with Chad sometimes, he's right back there. And you're really isolated and super secluded, and it's insanely quiet, like you've never heard quiet before, until there's a stick that breaks in the bush and you freak out and run back to the car because you think you're going to get eaten by a bear.
And it's just a mouse.
It's just, usually it's a squirrel or a mouse. I've never actually, run into a bear in the dark. Well, every single time, it's like the loudest stick breaking, and I'm like, I'm dead. That's okay. Then I'm like, oh, my kids. Oh, that sucks. But then it's a squirrel or a raccoon.
Yeah.
But then that all goes away, and your rate goes back to normal, and you start hearing the trees and the wind and the babbling river and stuff. All these little fun little things. And, you get the aurora shining in the sky, and it's just like, wow, how can I capture this in a beautiful way to share with people? And then taking a photo at night is its own really kind of unique experience because it's very passive and active at the same time. Like you have to, hike into these locations or find your composition and set up your camera gear, which you can have a lot of. But then you take a photo, and these photos take about 10 or 30 seconds to be captured. They're long exposures. So in that time, you have a chance to kind of look around and kind of take in your surroundings and look at the sky and just hang out, just be in the moment, again, in the moment. Again, until a stick breaks in the bush and you freak out and you run back to your car. And then you go back and get your camera gear. But then, the shutter will snap back and you'll see on the camera, on the back of the camera, it'll be this whole new world revealed to you in a whole new way. Like, you'll be looking at it with your eyes, and you'll be like, oh, this is neat, I can't see all that much. But then the camera reveals it all, and it's just like, it always brings a smile to my face, because it's like, again, it just allows you to see more than what your eyes let you see, and kind of opens your mind to like, well, what else am I missing? And then there's the night in the summer, but then there's the night in the winter. And the night in the winter, some really weird stuff starts happening, especially if you're near a lake. If it gets really cold, like minus 30 cold, the lake will actually start vibrating. It'll make this like weird wobbly noise, and it's so bizarre. It's like, is there an alien ship landing or something? It's just super strange. And then if you happen to be on that lake taking a photo, it's even weirder because it's like, doing stuff below your feet. But then it'll crack. Like you'll hear this huge boom, and then like this ice quake will happen on the lake, and you're just like, I hope I'm not falling in. The ice is like 2 feet thick, so it's not so bad. But it's still very terrifying, though, because it shakes the whole ground around you, and it's like super terrifying. But then you realize how awesome it was. And this other really cool thing happens. The trees actually start exploding, that's maybe a bit too dramatic, but not like Michael Bay explosion, but like they start making these like popping sounds. Like as the sap in the trees start to freeze, they'll actually crack and pop. So like in this location here, it's super forested. So in the distance, I'd hear a pop, and it would echo through the forest. And then I'd hear another one over here or something, and it would pop, and it would be in this side. And then eventually, as it starts getting really, really cold, you'll start hearing these pops more and more and more. And in the winter, the silence is so silent. It's super silent. And to have one of these pops come, and it echoes. It seems to echo for like a few seconds. And it's a really cool experience. So if you get out here when it's really cold, you'll be, gifted with a few little treats as well as probably some frozen toes. But it's well worth it because you get these really kind of unique experiences. And this one here, I was walking out on this lake just to take a picture of Orion here, which is this fancy guy up there in the stars. And in the distance, I just started hearing a little howl. And then I started hearing 2 howls, and I was like, that's weird. And I started hearing 3, and then all of a sudden there was like a full pack of wolves just howling away at the moon. And it was like, for like a few seconds, I was like, I don't know if I should be here. Like, am I gonna get, like, so I look down, and there's tracks across the lake, and I'm like, oh, okay, so they're close. And it was very loud, but then I realized it's like, I'm probably fine. And I just enjoyed the moment. It was about, 10 or 30 seconds of full-on, 10 wolves howling away into the night. I'm sitting there with my camera gear and just kind of just soaking it all in. So that was one of my top experiences. Speaking of fluffy friends, this is another really funny little story. So it doesn't always happen at night. Sometimes you get these really, really awesome experiences during the day, And so this was after, this is after a long night of shooting the stars. I was just going for a hike with a friend of mine, Gareth, and we were hiking down this road. We noticed some birds kind of trailing behind us. This is a gray jay here, Canada's national bird, by the way. Fun fact. They were just trailing behind us, and we'll stop and just hang out with it, give it some bird seed or whatever. And sure enough, out of nowhere, this guy comes wandering out of the forest. And he's all puffed up in his winter coat, and he comes on walking by, and he does this little circle and lies down like this. And my friend and I are just kind of like this is crazy. I think he's putting on a show here because he wants to get a bit of a snack out of us. But feeding birds is one thing. We never feed mammals because that's a whole other conversation. But it's definitely best to not feed the animals when you're out there because they get habitualized to humans and problems happen. But he was really trying his best. Look how cute he is, right? So he's trying to convince us to give him something. And we just sat there and enjoyed his company for a few minutes and took all sorts of photos of him. And so he got a little bit probably bummed out or mad at me for not giving him any food. So he got up and walked towards my camera bag. He's like, fine, I'll get it myself. So there was no food in my camera bag. So I was like, go ahead, hang out. But sure enough, he gets over there and he lifts his back leg and does his business on my camera bag. And
Yes.
and this is the reaction I get from him. So he walks away. I run over to my camera bag. I'm like, get out of here. And he's looking back now. He's like either super pleased with himself or he's like, yeah, you don't give me food, this is what you get. So, yeah. Needless to say, my bag smelled really horrible the rest of the trip in Algonquin. So this is the last story I have for you guys. But this past spring, I went to the Rockies. And this is a shameless plug. I have a book over here that you can have a check out later on. But I was there in the spring, and I just had this amazing experience out there at night. And at this super popular location, it's one of the most breathtaking views I've ever seen in my entire life. This is Peyto Lake down here. It's called the Bow Summit Lookout, and I highly recommend everyone go to this location. I was there in May, which is the off season, I guess. So I had this whole location to myself rather. But in the summertime, it's a lot of people. But again, it doesn't matter. It's just beautiful. You have to see it. So I went here a few times, and I kept saying to myself, how amazing would this be to see this location? I mean, beyond obviously the obvious, just by itself, it's amazing. But how amazing would it be to see this with the Northern Lights? Just because of the epic, epic to 11, right? So I kind of put it up my head, and I was like, well, make that one of my life's goals. And I left here just kind of with that in mind. But sure enough, the next day, my phone just starts exploding with all these, alerts of an incoming solar storm, and it's supposed to be a big one, so I'm panicking and checking the weather, and I'm like, is it going to work? And that Venn diagram I showed you earlier on, it kind of all come together. And sure enough, it did not disappoint. And I'm not sure you can see this here, but I drove up here, and I got out of my car, and north, south, east, west, the whole sky was covered, and you can see it with your eye. It was just absolutely stunning. It was just, it was sparkling. It was so clear. It was definitely one of those double rainbow moments. I'm not sure if I was crying and blubbering about it, but it was definitely impactful. So, and then, so I went from the parking lot up to the lookout point, which is about a 500-meter walk in the forest. And the previous day, I'd actually seen a couple of grizzly bears, so I was a little bit freaked out. But I went up there, and by the time I got to the spot, I was just completely floored with what I was seeing. And to be able to, the previous day, say to myself, how amazing would it be? And then to have that realized so fast was just really amazing. And on top of that, to be able to capture this photo and then bring that home with me, it was something that, is a very, very cool moment. And later on the night, so you can see here, there's these two bands of really smooth, I don't know what you call it, aurora light, beautiful light. And it's like someone took a stick to a pond, so there's this wake that went through it, and it's like it was blown away. And it just started to curl up and turn around, and I looked up in the sky, and it was just like sparkling and twisting, and it's like nothing I'd ever seen. It was really hard to describe. It's something that you just need to experience. And this disturbance moved from the north to the south, so these bands were coming across the sky, And this is me panning over towards the horizon to capture this kind of disturbance going through. And this is all like super clear with your eyes. I didn't even need a camera to see it. Whereas a lot of times in Ontario, when you capture these photos, you can't really see it with your eye. You can see it photographically, but you can't see it with your eye. But no, this is pretty much exactly how it looked, which was just mental. So after this, I drove to another location because it died down a little bit, and I captured this photo. And this is Emerald Lake in Yoho National Park. And this image is it's hard to describe because there's a lot going on here, but it's one of my most cherished shots just because of the alignment, like that alignment that I was telling you guys about earlier. You know, to be in a location like this where you have the weather on your side and that factor, but then to see an aurora, you know, in one of these locations, again, the odds become less and less and less that you're going to have these experiences. But then to have the aurora be so strong that it goes across the whole sky into the southern kind of perspective, again, it amps up the odds of seeing this. It's just, you know, less and less likely. But then for me, being a Milky Way nerd, I want to see the Milky Way too. So the aurora has to be strong enough that it goes to the south, but not strong enough that it doesn't wash out the entire sky with light. And in this photo, it all just kind of came together for me in the sense that, you know, the aurora was strong enough that I could see it, but I could also still capture the Milky Way core here. And, you know, the odds of me ever capturing a photo like this again are probably next to none. So the fact that I had this experience, and I was there in the Rockies, and I had an aurora like that, and the sky was clear, and I was in this beautiful location, and I was able to capture this photo reflecting into the water, and have it all kind of, you know, come together like that, to have that and bring it home with me and to share that. This is kind of like why I do it, right? These moments, and you can have these really kind of meaningful connections with nature when you're out there, as you know, we have here in Canada. You know, I want to promote this experience of being out in nature, but also like advocate for the protection of our natural world, because I think if we don't pay attention, then I think we're less apt to kind of protect it. And I think I speak to that from my own kind of like context, because, you know, when I lived in Toronto and it was like I watched, you know, nature shows and stuff like that, it was different. I thought it was really awesome, but it was still disconnected, and my urge to want to protect it wasn't necessarily as strong. So when you start getting out there and having these experiences, then you really see that connection one-to-one and want to protect it as much as possible. So this series hopefully will document Canada in not a heavy-handed way, just in a way to say that this is beautiful. We should all check it out and pay attention. Because if we don't pay attention, what's going to happen? I'm not sure. Outside of that, I'm also exhibiting my work, which is a fun new thing I'm trying out. This is Monogram Coffee down in Galt. If you are a coffee fan, it's a great place, and you can also check out some really big prints of my work, which is super, super fun. So head on down to Cambridge if you're feeling like it. And yeah, thank you very much. And this is super awesome to be here and chat and share my passion with you guys. So. Woo!